a 20-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis in 1978. The same year, Halloween was released, making her the Scream Queen. This natural-looking photograph was taken before Hollywood imposed the image of a horror icon on her for a whole decade. A party at comedian Eric Idle's apartment in 1978, where Chewbacca, Peter Mayhew, presents Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, with a gold record for the Star Wars soundtrack. Han Solo, Harrison Ford, is just dying of laughter, proving that behind the scenes, this trio was a real team. This is Betty Brosmer, who possessed a figure unreal for the 50s with a 45-centimeter waist, which she sculpted through weightlifting. While other girls dreamed of Hollywood, she became one of the first fitness models and married the founder of bodybuilding, Joe Weider. Soviet school graduates in 1989, at the height of perestroika. These voluminous hairstyles, created with liters of pre-lessed hairspray and white aprons, are symbols of a passing era, after which jeans, Coca-Cola, and a completely different country were already looming. October 14, 1912, John Schrank, a saloon owner, has just shot presidential candidate Theodore Roosevelt in the chest. The bullet was stopped by a thick 50-page speech and an eyeglass case in his pocket, after which Roosevelt went on stage and spoke for an hour and a half with a bullet in his chest. The television department in a department store in 1974, where a General Electric color television on wooden legs cost $1,650. Adjusted for inflation, today that would be almost $10,000, the price of a decent used car. The great helmsman Mao Zedong in 1961, demonstrating his vigor and health during a swim. These photographs were part of state propaganda, proving to the people that their leader was full of strength, while the country was experiencing the consequences of the catastrophic Great Leap Forward. The Athenian Acropolis in 1910, 2 years before the start of the Balkan Wars, which would forever change the map of Europe. In this photograph, the ancient ruins rise above a city still untouched by development, a reminder of the greatness of the past before the storms of the future. Jamie Lee Curtis in the early 80s, when she was trying to shed the Scream Queen cliché by starring in comedies like Trading Places. This poolside photo shoot was part of her plan to change her image, showing that she could be not only a maniac's victim, but also simply an elegant woman. In 1949, girls gather around one of the first portable televisions with a tiny screen. In an era with no remote controls or hundreds of channels, the very fact of having moving pictures in the house was a real miracle worth sitting on the floor for. Laurel and Hardy, the greatest comedy duo in history, take a break on set in 1932. Despite their on-screen image as bunglers, in real life they were perfectionists who rehearsed every scene for hours to achieve the perfect comedic effect. Found a family in 1963, Father Henry, already a living Hollywood legend, and his children Peter and Jane, who were yet to become symbols of the 60s counterculture. This photograph captures a moment of calm before the storm that would soon engulf not only their family, but all of America. November 1922, the antechamber of Tutankhamun's tomb, at the moment of its discovery by Howard Carter. These chests, chariots, and statues had lain in darkness for over 3,000 years, and this photograph is modern man's first glimpse of the pharaoh's untouched treasures. May 6, 1937, the Hindenburg airship burst into flames while landing in New Jersey, turning into a fireball in 34 seconds. This disaster, which occurred in front of hundreds of spectators and reporters, brought the era of passenger airships to an abrupt end. A Beatles concert in the mid-60s, capturing the phenomenon known as Beatlemania. For their parents' generation, it was mass hysteria, but for these girls, it was their first sense of freedom and a chance to release emotions that society forbade them from expressing. Soba noodle delivery in Tokyo, 1955, when an ordinary delivery man possessed the skills of an acrobat. In post-war Japan, where a car was a luxury, these guys on bicycles managed to weave through traffic with a tower of dozens of orders, proving that nothing is impossible. This is Kamala Harris in the late 80s, long before she became Vice President of the United States. In those years when she was in law school, no one could have imagined that this girl with a short haircut and a serious gaze would one day enter big politics. Hawaii, the 50s, the golden age of American car culture. This Chevrolet convertible and the guys in white shirts are the quintessence of post-war optimism, when a tank of gas cost pennies and every road led to adventure. Model Jerry Hall, in a Parisian nightclub 1976 during the era of disco and complete moral freedom. While the men around her sit in formal suits, she, in a transparent lace jumpsuit, embodies all the hedonism and rebellious spirit of the 70s. August 23, 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt delivers his famous speech against monopolies. It was for this uncompromising fight against large corporations that he earned the nickname Trust Buster and went down in history as a defender of the common man, trimming a giant elm tree in Massachusetts in the late 19th century. In an era without hydraulic lifts and chainsaws, these men, looking like ants, risked their lives climbing to great heights with handsaws to care for the giant trees. The presentation of the new Ford Edsel convertible in Las Vegas, 1958. The company invested a fortune in this car, positioning it as the car of the future, but it ended up becoming one of the greatest commercial failures in the history of the American auto industry. A McDonald's restaurant in the 50s, when a hamburger cost 15 cents, and the sign proudly announced 12 million sold. It was this model, with its fast conveyor belt service system and golden arches, that forever changed the global food industry. This is a koi carp named Hanako, who, according to the records of several of her owners, lived for 226 years from 1751 to 1977. This fish was a living witness to the change of eras, from the samurai to the nuclear age. Lord Walter Rothschild, an eccentric British aristocrat, rides through London in a carriage drawn by zebras in 1895. He did it on a bet to prove that African zebras, unlike horses, could not be tamed. And he was right. They were a nightmare to control. A female assembly worker at a factory in California installs machine guns in the nose of a B-25 bomber. 1942. While the men were fighting on the front lines, these Rosie the Riveters built the war machine that gave the Allies air superiority, the computing division of the U.S. Treasury in the mid-1920s. These women were the first computers. They manually performed complex calculations on adding machines, doing the work that today's processors do in fractions of a second. Benito Mussolini in the mid-1920s with a lion cub in his arms, a gift to him as a symbol of power and strength. The Italian dictator carefully crafted his macho image, using animals and staged photos to appear to the people as an unwavering leader of the nation. John F. Kennedy Jr. interviews former President Gerald Ford for his magazine, George, in 1995. It was a unique meeting between a representative of America's most famous Democratic dynasty and the man who succeeded the Republican Nixon in the White House. Soviet lion-tamer Olga Borisova with her Lion King in 1977. Their life together ended tragically. During the filming of a movie, the lion attacked an assistant, after which the animal had to be put down, and Olga herself suffered severe psychological trauma. Urban planning before the advent of computer programs, when architects had to work literally in the field. To make changes to the master plan, engineers crawled on their knees across giant maps, proving that the scale of the project sometimes required physical effort as well. 1948, the chairman of a Native American tribe, George Gillette, cannot hold back tears as the U.S. Secretary of the Interior signs an order transferring 155,000 acres of their land. This photograph captured the moment when the centuries-old history of an entire people was crossed out with a single stroke of a pen for the construction of a dam. 3 Hollywood queens, Grace Kelly, Elizabeth Taylor, and Lorraine Day, at the airport in New York, mid-50s. In an era when every flight was an event, even a simple appearance on the plane's steps turned into a fashion show, setting style standards for years to come. Johnny Cash and Ray Charles in a recording studio, where 2 legends of American music seem to have forgotten about work. The man in black and the genius of soul whose lives were full of drama and struggle are simply laughing like old friends. This is Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last emperor of Germany, whose image with a curled mustache and a shiny helmet became a symbol of an entire era. A few years after this picture was taken, the empire he ruled would collapse, and he himself would go into exile, living out his days in Holland. A public urinal in Paris, 1865, photographed by Charles Marville. Before Baron Haussmann rebuilt the city, such street conveniences were an integral part of the landscape, where private life and public space intersected in the most unexpected ways. 6-year-old Carrie Fisher watches her mother, Hollywood star Debbie Reynolds, perform from backstage in Las Vegas, 1963. 14 years later, this girl would become an icon herself, but in a galaxy far, far away. Martin Luther King Jr. and his son remove a burned cross from the lawn in front of their home in Atlanta, April 1960. Instead of hiding the traces of hatred, he calmly and methodically uproots them in front of his child, teaching him the most important lesson: evil cannot be allowed to go unpunished. Go students of one of Sweden's first schools for girls with the right to higher education, 1908. While the world stood on the brink of great upheavals, these serious faces in austere dresses were already preparing to fight for their rights and change society from within. The Covina Bowl in California, a prime example of the Googie architectural style popular in the 50s. These futuristic shapes and neon signs were a symbol of the American optimism of the atomic age, when even an ordinary bowling alley looked like a spaceport. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino on the set of The Godfather in 1972. Behind the scenes of the grim mafia saga, Michael Corleone could afford to relax and fool around, showing that even in the most serious projects there is room for simple human joy. The Eiffel Tower under construction, 1888. At the time, the Parisian intelligentsia called it an ugly skeleton and demanded its demolition immediately after the exhibition, never suspecting that this metal frame would become the most recognizable symbol of France.